Hi, everybody. Come on in, hang out for a bit. We'll get started momentarily. We'll give some folks a chance to log in. Welcome to our latest version of Community Conversation. We are excited for this one since this is yet again a little bit about one of our own programs and one of our partners. So we're excited to dive into this with everybody. Hello, Liz from Cincinnati. You are hilarious, always the first one. The day that you're not the first one, I'm going to be like, what is going on with Liz? So hey, for fun, just like Liz, if you want to say where they're from, I think it's always great in the chat. Feel free to throw comments in the chat, questions in the chat. That's what we'll use as far as communicating with you all. We'll leave some time at the end for a discussion. But until then, please remain on mute if you don't mind. This way we can get through our presentation in a timely manner and leave plenty of time for discussion. So for those that don't know me, I am Nick Giallourakis, the Executive Director of Elephants and Tea and the Stephen G. Cancer Foundation. We are delighted to have 6 of us here today. Usually it's like 2, 3, or 4 of us, but 6, we're like the super team today. This community conversation is how narrative therapy can be a powerful healing tool during your cancer experience, or I should say someone's cancer experience as well. Before we get into narrative therapy and even specifically about our writing workshops where we implement something like narrative therapy, we're going to do a little bit of an icebreaker with those of us that are presenting today, just so you can hear who we are, where we're from. And we always like to start with a cheesy icebreaker with our writing workshops that help break the ice and get people to speak up a little bit. With that, I'll lead it off since why not? And I'm Nick, Shaker Heights, Ohio. My favorite chip is really any kind of kettle chip, but I am always a sucker for Cape Cod style chip. Barbecue mesquite barbecue is like my jam. So anywho, that's me, my chip, and I will pass left to right on my screen. So Lisa, you're up first.
Hello, I am Lisa. I am the Marketing Communications Manager at Elephants and Tea. I am from Reading, Massachusetts. So I see a Middleborough, Mass in the chat. That's exciting. And my favorite chip currently, I feel like it changes a lot, but right now it's the brand Late July and it's new. It's like Garden Ranch. They're basically like Cool Ranch Doritos, but they like make you think they're healthier. But then I eat the whole bag. So it really just doesn't, cancels out, but they're delicious.
Thanks, Lisa. What was the name again? Late July?
Late July is the brand. And then it's the Garden Ranch, I think is what it's called, flavor.
Okay. All right. Never heard of it. Fantastic. I love this topic. Okay, Kayla, you're next, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kayla. I am one of the licensed clinical social workers that helps facilitate the writing workshops. I am in Denver, Colorado, but I grew up in Pasadena, and I also saw somebody in the chat from Pasadena. So I feel like there's some weird connections already happening in the chat. My favorite chip, I always have a bag of like just classic tortilla chips, like Tostitos tortilla chips in my house all the time. And it's my go-to. I'll just grab it like a handful whenever I walk into the kitchen. And it's always on my grocery list. I don't know why. I don't need them with anything. Like I don't need salsa. I don't need guacamole. I just need a salty chip.
Thank you, Kayla. Fantastic. Pasadena, I did not know that. Very cool. Lizzy, you're next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lizzy. I'm from Long Island, New York. And I happen to not like chips at all, but I'm obsessed with chocolate chips. I do like chocolate chips. I have an obsession with chocolate chips. So thank you for having me, everybody, and nice to see you.
The shock on everyone's face up here, Lizzy, when you said that, because we even talked about this as a topic, and I think you secretly were like, oh, watch this. I'm going to throw a bomb in there, and you did. But well played with the chocolate chips. That's fantastic. Rachel, you're next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel. I'm the Director of Content at Elephants and Tea. And we do this icebreaker so much that I feel like I have to like change it up sometimes. I feel like lately I've been into pretzels a lot, specifically like pretzel thins.
Nice. Well played. Thanks, Rachel. I thought about changing it up as well because we always do it, but I'm holding strong on the Cape Cod kettle chips. Whitney, last but not least.
Hi, I'm Whitney. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm the other social worker who helps run the narrative workshops, or the writing workshops, sorry. I'm the narrative therapist on the team. And I always change it up too, because like I feel like it's based on where I'm at, like at that time. So lately I've been loving those pea crisp things. I don't even know the real word name for them, but the Caesar salad flavored ones. They're kind of like a Cool Ranch situation, but Caesar.
Did you say salad flavor?
Yeah.
Wow. Like I am like learning so much from chips. We're not talking about narrative therapy.
I'll
really,
drop
but
some to your mailbox.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Wow. Okay, cool. I didn't know that was a flavor. Just the more you know. So thanks everybody for playing with our awesome icebreaker. If those in our audience today want to put in the chat, what's your favorite chip? Why not? Go for it, participate. We like people to chat. So for those that might be new to our community conversations, the ideas with these are to have certain topics, might be a little more educational, a little more information than our typical content that we do with the storytelling side of things, but it's still, as you can see, the narrative therapy is tied back to our storytelling. So before we get into some information about what is narrative therapy and even what our writing workshops are and how responsive it has been from folks, because we're going to share some results in our evaluations that we've done so far, thought it was important to kind of lay the groundwork of how this all started and why Lizzy is also here from I'm Not Done Yet Foundation, because Lizzy and her organization play a very key role in what we have been able to do. So first of all, why narrative therapy? Why writing workshops? And I won't steal Whitney's thunder because she's going to talk specifically about narrative therapy. But overall, the idea here was to figure out a way that we can get in front of patients and survivors sooner. We heard loud and clear that when Elephants and Tea launched in, oh gosh, it's going to be 4 years coming up this December, people wish that they knew about Elephants and Tea sooner. They wish they had some sort of storytelling or support system sooner. And so we thought to ourselves, what can we develop to help people and let people know that not only is Elephants and Tea there, but the power of writing is an important tool early on as well, reflecting on one's narrative. So that was the idea, was to create these workshops. Whitney was an integral part of designing these for us. We actually, thanks to Dana Farber, who wanted to be like the very first ones that we worked with on this, we were going to do this in person. And Whitney reminded me on the pre-call that this was actually planned out the March of 2020 to go to Dana Farber with Paige Molinowski and her young adult program there. But this thing called COVID didn't allow us to do that. So we had to pivot and figure out what can we do next. So thankfully, our friends at Dana Farber, our friends at the Stanford Young Adult AYA program, they were almost like our guinea pigs in doing this for the first time. And it was really cool in using writing prompts to reflect on one's narrative. And we'll get to some really cool examples of that. But the idea really was to make sure that this was also free to hospitals and bring people together. With COVID, we know that the hospital programs, people couldn't come together. It just wasn't possible and still is not possible at some hospitals to bring people together with COVID. So this was an opportunity in a very similar setting like this, using Zoom, to create that environment where we bring people together for 90 minutes and run one of these workshops, if you will. Another big component of this was how can we have some sort of tangible takeaway from it here as well. So it's one thing to do the workshop itself. It's another thing to actually send something like our magazines. What could we send to folks that participate in the workshop that they could actually implement these writing prompts in this workshop in their day-to-day lives? And that came into play with our own journal. And I didn't plan this, but thankfully it's right here. I have a copy of what one of our journals looks like, and Rachel Mahalko, our director of content, led the charge in designing this, and it came out awesome. It's as thick as a novel, if not thicker, which is just great. And it has writing prompts and quotes in it. And it was something that has become a very important part of these workshops as well, for people to continue it outside of that 90 minutes that we do these writing workshops with. Whitney, Lisa, and Kayla were also a part of helping design the journal as well. So again, bringing in I'm Not Done Yet Foundation and Lizzy, some background on the two of us. We met, we think 2019 at Case Western Reserve's AYA, Case Comprehensive Cancer Center's AYA Symposium in person before COVID was around. We both have mutual ties to university hospitals, right, Lizzy? I think it's actually in Case. So we had a conversation that just to get to know each other at the time. And then COVID happened and, you know, life moved on in our own direction. And then one day I saw an email from our friends at First Ascent about a collaboration that they were doing with I'm Not Done Yet Foundation. And it hit me. I was like, you know, I should maybe reach out to Lizzy. And little did I realize Lizzy reached out to me that same day. It was pretty cool just how the world works sometimes. And we had a conversation. Lizzy was looking and her organization was looking to help be a part of something that's more hands-on, and how could they help people, patients specifically, you know, in the AYA space, get more of a hands-on approach. And this really seemed to fit what they were looking to do. And that we were so honored. And thanks to Lizzy and I'm Not Done Yet Foundation, we were able to receive a grant from them and really grow this program. Number one, being able to print 1,000 copies of the journal to be able to give to free to anyone that attends to help continue this. And I should mention that it is the Elephants and Tea and I'm Not Done Yet Foundation journal. And two, it allowed us to bring on for each workshop folks like Kayla, originally like Lisa, but Lisa is now a full-time employee of Elephants and Tea, Whitney, and then a couple of others who are helping us as well, Wendy Griffith from MD Anderson, and Taylor Butts, who used to work at the Cleveland Clinic. And I should mention too that Kayla works full-time for the Dear Jack Foundation as well. But again, making sure that we had a licensed social worker a part of these workshops, because that's extremely important in making sure that we do cover those bases for obvious reasons. So with that, I don't want to steal any more thunder from Lizzy and let her talk about her organization a little bit. And then from there, we'll then go into, I'm going to share some results on the impact this is having in the community. And then the rest of the agenda will be Whitney will talk about narrative therapy. And then Kayla is going to lead a cool little panel with Lisa and Rachel as well. So with that, Lizzy, I will let you take it away and share your screen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Nick, and the team at Elephants and Tea for having me and letting me talk a little bit about I'm Not Done Yet and introducing you a little bit to Bobby. The mission of the I'm Not Done Yet Foundation is to help AYA patients and survivors live their lives as fully as possible. Bobby had 3 cancer diagnoses throughout his life. Starting at the age of 5, he was diagnosed with a stage 4 neuroblastoma. And he had lots and lots of chemo and surgeries and clinical trials at a variety of different institutions. And everywhere he went, there were plenty of things for the pediatric patient. The space was appropriate. There were activities and toys and programs. And we never needed anything. But when he was diagnosed the 3rd time, he had just begun his freshman year at Duke. He was living away from home for the first time. He was meeting new friends and learning new experiences. And it was a completely different situation, as you could imagine. When he had to take a medical leave halfway through his freshman year, he had to leave his friends, he had to leave his college life, he had to leave his community. And of course, that led to frustration and isolation and everything that goes with that. So he died on September 8th, 2017. And the very next day, on September 9th, 2017, our family decided to start the I'm Not Done Yet Foundation to continue his legacy. We decided to make our mission focused in on the needs and the voids that Bobby experienced that last year and a half of his life. Treatment space, age-appropriate treatment spaces, age-appropriate support and experiences, research. And we knew in order to do all of that, we needed to establish a group of supporters and advocates and fundraisers to help us advance that mission. Over the years, the 5 years since, we've been able to enter into a number of different partnerships to further our mission. A recent exciting thing that just happened is in May, we had a ribbon cutting for an AYA space at NYU Langone Cancer Center for Kids on Long Island, which was Bobby's home oncology treatment space most of his life. We have a partnership with Duke to continue a couple of programs that Bobby had actually started and participated in while he was a patient there as a college student, including Bobby's Coaches, which is a peer-to-peer support group that that uses AYA cancer survivors paired with AYA cancer patients to help them go through their treatment and understand what they're going through and sort of lead them along. Bobby died of a very aggressive sarcoma, and when he was offered treatment this last time, he was offered the same kinds of chemos that he was offered 10 years before as a neuroblastoma patient. So it was pathetic how little progress had been made. So we feel strongly about supporting bench research, and we do that at the Case Comprehensive Cancer Research. And in the 5 years, we've been able to establish a big group of supporters, friends and community members and people from all across the country. And we've also established the I'm Not Done Yet Youth Advisory Board, which has been super helpful. Moving forward, we have wanted to, probably our biggest focus is to increase the awareness of AYA challenges and what these patients need and what they're going through. And by doing so, increase the awareness of I'm Not Done Yet and what we can offer this AYA community. And in order to do all of that, of course, we need to continue our fundraising, and we're always working on that. And building on and expanding our core pillars. And that leads me to how delighted we are to be partnering with Elephants and Tea around this therapeutic writing program. When I spoke to Nick about this a couple of months ago, when we first started collaborating around this, it dawned on me how much and he was just kind of giving me the overview of the program. I had already met and spoken to Whitney a little bit about the value of therapeutic writing for young cancer patients. And, it was bittersweet in a way, because there was a number of different social workers throughout Bobby's experience as a young adult who tried to get him to journal, and he wanted to journal, but there was just no real focus around it. And it was very, it was kind of random depending on who was leading him. And there wasn't really a formal program with appropriate prompts, and certainly not a community around that. It was just him doing it himself. And, when I was talking to Nick about the idea for this program and what the vision was, I thought about how much Bobby really would have benefited from this. And, we're just so happy to be part of it. And sadly, he couldn't benefit, but we're just glad that in his name, other young patients can benefit from it. In addition to that, a lot of what we realized by talking about this program is that it addresses two of the core tenets of our mission, which is the isolation from peers that young adult AYA and young adult cancer survivors and patients have, and also the dearth of psychosocial support programs and resources. And thankfully, that's growing. And again, in the 5 years since Bobby was diagnosed, we didn't even know we had never heard the term AYA ever. Although when we finally heard it, we understood it because he had been living it. There just hadn't really been a name around it. Luckily, in these last 5 years, there's been more and more awareness around the population and their needs. And this program, I'll leave that to the experts to talk about the specifics of it, but we really feel like this addresses a very important part of our mission, which is providing that psychosocial support for these young patients. So I'm going to turn this back over to Nick to get more specific about the program. Thank you all again for participating in this webinar, and thanks to the team at Elephants and Tea for including me. And we are delighted with our partnership and our collaboration.
Thank you, Lizzy. And thank you so much for letting everybody know a little bit more about I'm Not Done Yet Foundation and Bobby as well. So thank you so much. Okay, now I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see the screen here? Cool. All right. So before we have Whitney talk a little bit specifically about what narrative therapy is, we thought it'd be really cool just to give you some high-level statistics on our evaluation that we've done with these writing workshops. And first of all, again, how we do the program is it's a Zoom meeting. We then put in the survey link at the end and the Zoom chat and a follow-up email for anyone that attended. We've had about 145 people attend our writing workshops this past year, and 35% completed the survey, which is pretty cool. To the comment of we wanted to reach survivors earlier, we're doing that with these writing workshops, and just wanted to show that here, that it's been pretty powerful that 2%, 24% are newly diagnosed or in treatment, another 14% less than a year out of treatment, and 30% 1 to 3 years out of treatment. This was the area that we knew we wanted to focus on, and we're achieving that, which is pretty awesome to see. Another big chunk is 6+ years out, but still the fact that we are reaching folks, and I can tell you that there are some folks that will join these workshops right from their hospital bed. I think it's extremely important not only to share with them the power of narrative therapy, but also too, the power of being there for them while they're in the hospital too, right? So I think that that's something else that we're achieving with this program, which is really cool to see from that standpoint. 94% of those that filled out the survey said they were very satisfied. 100% said they were very satisfied or satisfied. That's just tremendous. There was not one person that was neutral or dissatisfied with the program. 100% of people that filled out the survey said they would recommend it to a fellow patient, survivor, or caregiver. Again, that 100% speaks for itself, I feel. 90% said this workshop inspired them to continue to use writing as a coping or healing tool. Extremely important. Again, like we said, wanting to implement something that isn't over people's head. It is easy enough to comprehend, easy enough to understand, and easy enough to implement in their lives. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Whitney to talk a little bit more about specifically narrative therapy.
Thank you. So kind of a background on narrative therapy and why stories matter and are important. We as humans make sense of everything in our world through stories. So if you think about if somebody asks you to introduce yourself, you always introduce yourself by putting yourself in relation to something else that you know or love or that other people know. And that's an example of you're telling the story of who you are. So all of our relationships, every event in our life, and even what we view as our plans for the future are part of this story that we have for our lives. So when something unexpected interrupts our view of who we are and where we're going, such as a cancer diagnosis, that can really impact our identity and how we view ourselves. Next slide, please. So narrative therapy is a type of therapy that looks at your story and kind of helps identify a way to retell it. So you are able to identify where that problem was in your storyline and then give the power back to yourself and recreate where you're going in the future. Writing or therapeutic writing is one of the best tools that can be used as a part of narrative therapy and very therapeutic. So it provides a really good way to hold on to things that are important or let go of things that you need to let go of. And if you know anything about our journal, it's all about holding on to and letting go. The idea of writing is between you and the paper. So there's a safe space, there's no judgment. And our workshops use not only the therapeutic writing, but also storytelling. So as a part of our workshop, participants will have a prompt and they'll have a few minutes to write. And then a big part of it is identifying and being a part of a community where you can tell your story if you want to. And so that's where you're able to own your own story and share it with everybody around you. So that was kind of the basis of where we created the workshops from, the ideas of having a safe space, allowing people to hold on to and let go, and teaching the skill of writing using the prompts. And there's no better way to kind of show what this is like than to share a couple of different views of some of our writers. And Kayla, I'm going to turn it over to you. You're going to kind of lead a little conversation about that.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you to everyone that went before and for sharing. I am super excited. I know it was kind of alluded to as a panel, but I like to phrase it more as I get to have a conversation with two dear friends to learn more about their experiences with writing. And I just find it such a neat opportunity to kind of pick your brains a little bit and allow everyone else to listen in as to how writing and journaling has been impactful for the both of you. I realized that we didn't really have a chance to introduce the two of you as you are young adults and you have your own cancer history. So I would love it if maybe you would just share briefly a little bit about that and kind of the reason then that why we're having this conversation with the two of you.
I'll start. So I was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer in January of 2019. And it was very aggressive, went right in, did 13 chemo infusions, had surgery, and then had 36 rounds of radiation. And with triple negative, because it's non-hormonal, there's no kind of medication that you're on once your active treatment is complete. So I am about 3.5 years out from my diagnosis, which is a good thing, and all is well right now. So that's my update.
Thanks, Lisa. Rachel, how about you?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma when I was 19 years old. It was June of 2018, and I did chemo, I did radiation. Yeah, I was in college when I was diagnosed, and so that definitely it always interrupts your life, but it really I had to take time off school, all that fun stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we kind of dive into writing as a tool throughout your cancer experience, I'm wondering if you would share kind of any experience you had with writing before that. I think Lizzy kind of alluded to this idea that journaling as a concept or writing as a concept can seem overwhelming to undertake. And so I'm just wondering kind of if you had experience doing it before your cancer experience. I'll start with Rachel.
Yeah, so I've always loved to write. Yeah, since I could hold a pencil, I was writing. I've always enjoyed storytelling. I've always been a big reader. English was always one of my favorite classes. I loved writing essays and editing essays. And yeah, I had fun. I remember being in middle school and working on writing a book with some of my friends, and writing has always just been a big part of my life and something that I enjoy.
Lisa.
Yeah, so prior to my cancer diagnosis, I was actually an elementary school teacher. I taught grades 3 and 4. And I always gravitated towards teaching writing workshop. I would incorporate writing in every subject. I loved teaching it because I loved doing it as well. And when I was diagnosed, I was 31. I realized I forgot to say that. And I had 2 little kids, at the time. And I actually did use writing sort of as a coping mechanism, even before cancer. I found myself writing about motherhood. I was really in the trenches. I had 2 kids under the age of 2.5. So I had my hands very full. And I actually had one of my pieces published on a popular motherhood website called Motherly. So I kind of was already doing writing and using it kind of in that way. And I was diagnosed with cancer when I was actually working on my second piece for that website.
Wow. So obviously you both come to this with some passion about writing, and it's obvious that we get to see that through the workshops and the work that you do. I'm wondering if was there a moment, or do you remember a moment during your cancer experience when you specifically turned to writing, or you thought like, oh, I've used this in the past, this could be a great coping tool for me to use? Lisa, I'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I vividly remember sitting in the waiting room. I had just been diagnosed maybe 2 days before, and I was in the waiting room waiting to have my PET scan, my bone scan, like all the full body scans so that they could stage me. And I remember opening up the notes section of my phone and just like letting my words just fill that. And I vividly remember my husband looking over at me and being like, what are you doing? And I was just like, shh, like, I'm getting my thoughts down. And it's funny because looking back, that was often like my go-to, was kind of leading up to those appointments, or when I had that time, that downtime, that's where I found that my anxiety was really heightened. So I feel like it was in those moments that I used it kind of as a process, a way to help myself process everything. But I also ended up starting a blog to kind of update my family and friends, because I had, amazingly, so many people in my life that wanted to check in on me. And it was very difficult, as I'm sure a lot of people know, when you're going through it, to like have all these little conversations and update people with the same information. So I found it easier. So I also kind of use writing in that way. And that was nice to not only update people, but also to kind of try to let people in on what it really was like as a young adult with 2 little kids, going through what I was going through.
Mm-hmm. Rachel, what about for you?
Yeah, so I've always been really into journaling, really into using writing to like process things and just like get my thoughts out. I'm the type of person that's in my head a lot, and so it really helps to like get things down on paper and out of my head. And so I journaled before diagnosis a lot. I would like collect notebooks to like do all my journaling in. And I remember really like before I was even diagnosed, when I was kind of going through the process of something's up, we don't know what it is. It was really helpful to be journaling through that process. Yeah, and like I still have my notebook tucked away somewhere of just all my journal entries from when I was getting diagnosed, when I was in treatment, with all like the dates at the top. And yeah, it was just really helpful to have a space to like write down my thoughts. And when I was in treatment, I didn't know about things like elephants and tea. And so I did feel very alone. And so it was at least helpful to be able to get my thoughts out for myself, kind of to myself, just in writing. And in a way, it did make me feel a little less alone.
Mm-hmm. I noticed that, Lisa, you spoke a little bit more about kind of a public form of journaling, and Rachel, you speak a little bit more, at least in just this conversation right now, a little bit more private, like that's for you. Do you notice any difference in how you approach something if you feel like this is something that's going to be shared versus something that's just for yourself?
Yeah, I feel like, so I've done a lot of like public kind of writing as well. But yeah, I think it is different. I think there's something beautiful about, like Whitney talked about earlier, just like unfiltered, like getting your thoughts down for yourself. And like I'm very into, like I love like creative nonfiction, like sharing your story, very much the writing that's in our magazines. And I've done a lot of that. And like I've shared it through our website, through our magazines, and even before that. And yeah, it's very interesting, the difference between journaling your own story and then like turning your story into more of a narrative rather than just like processing from a journal prompt. And I remember like I took a class in college on creative nonfiction, and it was like a month-long class, and I had to write like, I want to say 40 pages was how much we were supposed to write, and I wrote like 80 pages, and I wrote about my cancer experience. And so like once I started writing, I just could not stop.
I love it. Lisa, what about for you?
Yeah, I would have to agree. I feel like there are definitely times where I write more and it's more of just like a stream of consciousness, and as Rachel said, kind of like unfiltered, and maybe if somebody else were to read it, it might seem really jumbled, but it's what came directly from, you know, my mind and my heart. If I'm going to share something publicly, I feel like I do kind of, I wouldn't say button it up a little bit, but I typically will add a little bit more like style to the way I wrote it. But oftentimes the ideas are similar, because when I didn't find Elephants in Tea until I had like just finished active treatment. And that's when I really made the connection of, you know, reading other people and what they're going through, even though it was different cancer, you know, I could really relate to it. So part of me was like, you know what? I think people out there, regardless of what I'm writing, I feel like there's someone that will understand and someone that this will resonate with. So I think in that way, it kind of blended together, but there have definitely been times where I just like go to town in a journal and kind of just keep writing, not even thinking about it, versus trying to put a little more like writing style to it.
Well, I think you both highlight that there's no right way then to do it, right? Like there's no, which I think is what's so beautiful. And we say it all the time in our writing workshops too, like for those of us that are perfectionists and want to do things the right way and make sure that I do it the way that it's supposed to be done. And I think like the emphasis on the fact that that's not actually what needs to happen with writing and therapeutic writing, that there's so many different ways to do it. I do think the two of you have a very special experience with your relationship with writing, and that you have been doing it for so long. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit, because I know so many people come to our writing workshops that have never done it before, and it can be incredibly intimidating, and we don't know where to start and we don't know what to do. So I'm just wondering kind of any tips or thoughts that the two of you have for people that might be intimidated by it or not know where to start, haven't done it before, but are interested in trying it again as a tool, as another strategy, a different, you know, way to put something in your tool belt to use if you might need it. I don't remember who I left off on. Lisa, let's start with you this time. Okay. I told you I would forget.
It's fine. I would say, because I agree, I think that sometimes the idea of just putting your thoughts on paper, especially a blank page, like when you open that up, it can be very intimidating, especially if it's not something you've done before. So a lot of times I have used like list making. So I'll think of something and I'll even just like list out words or emotions or events or whatever it is that I'm feeling in the mood to think about, or what's on my mind. And then this is going to sound silly, and this is probably the elementary educator in me, but there have been times when I've used like a good old fashioned writing web, where I've literally been like, I cannot stop thinking about my surgery. And I'll write surgery and I'll circle it, and then I'll just write things off that web that relate to it. And it kind of is a way to keep you more focused, but also it's interesting to see kind of where that takes you to. So those can sometimes be a little less like intimidating, I guess. It's also very helpful to use a prompt like we offer at our writing workshop. So I'm going to plug that in there too, that we will be doing another one in the fall. And I think if you didn't get to come to the one in June, it would be a really cool way to give it a try. And you can see if you have a prompt, it does kind of guide you. And we reiterate, like Kayla said, that there's no right or wrong, you know, there's no right answer to a prompt. Some people may interpret it in a different way. So sometimes rather than a blank page, having a prompt or something is more helpful. And another thing I just really want to stress is I feel like there have been plenty of times where I'm all in my feels and I want to write because that's something that I know helps me, but I sit to write and it's just not happening. And I feel like it's really important to say, don't force it. If it isn't feeling right in that moment to you, that doesn't mean it never will. It just means maybe in that moment, you need to pull out a different tool from your like coping box, you know? So there have been plenty of times where I'm like, I'm going to go write for 10 minutes and see if that helps me. And I'm staring at the page. And instead I'm like, you know what? It's going to feel better if I just go and get some like sunshine on my face and take some deep breaths in nature. And that's what I'm going to choose to do, because forcing it, I don't know if you would get the same, you know, healing effect than if you were kind of called to actually write. So I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like there were lots of helpful tips in there for how to get started. Thank you. Rachel, what about you?
Yeah, so definitely like the list making, I'm very much that type of person as well. Kind of like a brain dump kind of journaling is very helpful. Just like anything that's in your head, just like list it out. Yeah, like I did that recently, that like I started making a to-do list and then it just kind of turned into a brain dump of everything that's been stressing me out. And like it was just such a helpful release. And I think like Kayla, you mentioned perfectionism earlier, like I'm a perfectionist. And so it's hard to start something new and be gentle with yourself, give yourself grace. And so I think like coming at it from an angle of, I don't have to do this every day. Like, I don't even have to have like a schedule to my journaling. And like Lisa, you said, like, you can sit down for like 10 minutes, you can sit down for 5 minutes. I think that's really helpful. Like, I think even for me, sometimes it can feel very daunting because I feel like there's so much in my head sometimes that I'm like, I have to get it all out. But even just like 5 minutes of writing can be super helpful. And like, I think what's beautiful about journaling too is that, again, it's like really only for you. And so there's no pressure of like, oh my gosh, like this has to be perfect. This has to be like beautiful writing. When it's really just for you to process your emotions and get things out of your head.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to make sure that we have enough time for questions, but I have one more for the two of you. Just, I think about the process of journaling, and then you put this in a book where you take, you know, it's a free piece of paper, and then what do you, if anything, do with those things? Do you ever go back and reflect on something? Do you kind of see either how you've changed or you've grown or you've stayed stuck on certain things? So just kind of wondering, for those that are thinking about possibly doing it, there might then be this question of, okay, and then what? Like, then what do I do with it? So I'm just wondering if you would touch on that. And I'll start with Rachel this time.
Yeah, so I've kept most of the journals that I've written in and journaled in like over my life. And sometimes I'll go back and read them. Especially like when I was in treatment and like after treatment, I was very much in a phase of like writing poetry as my journaling. And so like that was almost like combining like list making and journaling in a way for me. And so I think like I still will go back to those poems sometimes. And I really enjoy like looking at those. But sometimes I just find it helpful to just get it on the page and kind of forget about it. Like I don't feel the need to go back to a lot of that most of the time.
Yeah. Lisa, what about you?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Rachel. I'm definitely a little bit borderline hoarder when it comes to my notebooks. So I definitely have them all. But I don't go back to a lot of what I've written. There are a few things that I'll go back to. I very shortly after being diagnosed. And now that I think about it, the things I go back to are usually kind of my like lists, my shorter kind of pieces, which is interesting. But right after being diagnosed, I remember that I sat, and when I was just very emotional and needed to get something on paper, I wrote out a list of all the things that I needed to like fight for, that I needed to give everything I had for. And I ended up filling many pages with that. But I kept that one for sure. And I'll glance in it if I'm having, a difficult time with something. I also, on the day after my active treatment ended, I started every night. I wrote one thing I was grateful for from that day specifically. And I kept up with it for an entire year. That was like my goal. So that's a really special one too. So I'll look back at that every once in a while. But more recently, rather than a journal, I feel like I've been using social media. I've been using Instagram, like my captions, as kind of my like place to share my writing, whether that be an update or something happening in my life where I feel like I just want to share kind of where I'm at about it. And I think that honestly connects to that power that I found when I found Elephants in Tea, and feeling like not only helping people understand kind of what going through it as a young adult is like, but also knowing that I have people in my life now who get it, who have been through what I've been through, and having that kind of like special connection in that way. So yeah, I'll read those from time to time as well.
Awesome. Well, I, in the interest of time, will get us back over to Nick so that we can take some questions. But as always, I am humbled to have had a conversation with the two of you, and appreciate your vulnerability and honesty to those that are here with us. And just thank you both so much.
Thanks, Kayla, Lisa, and Rachel. That was great. I really appreciate deep dive there. That was awesome. So with that, everybody, we do want to open it up. We have about 10 minutes left. If anyone attending today has any questions or comments that they want to bring up, I should mention as well, if you are at a hospital and you're looking to maybe have us do one of these writing workshops with you, please let us know. And I'll say, Lisa, why don't you put your email in the chat, and if anyone is interested, to reach out to Lisa afterwards. And of course, as Lisa teased, we are planning on hosting another larger event for the overall Elephants in Tea audience with one of these writing workshops later this fall as well too. So any questions from anyone today, whether it is writing workshop related, narrative therapy related, I'm not done yet related, or Elephants in Tea related, the floor is open to those that are out there.
I have a question, Nick.
Is that Abby?
Yes, it's Abby.
Hi. Hi,
How's it
Abby.
going? Long time no
How are
see.
you?
I'm doing well. Hey, thanks for sharing all this today. I think the program is just amazing, and really appreciate what you guys are doing. As one who loves to write but has a hard time putting pen to paper, I was wondering if you guys had like strategies that you incorporate within your workshop that kind of eat the elephant one bite at a time, if I can say that. Really breaking it down for people and starting with, maybe there's an overall writing prompt, but if you're just staring at a blank piece of paper, what are the ways that you can kind of guide them through it, especially for those? And then my second question is, aside from just journaling, I know that you're exploring other creative outlets for expressing or processing, and was wondering if you wanted to chat about that at all.
So the first one, and anyone on our team, please feel free to jump in as far as taking a bite of the smaller elephant along the way. The way that the workshops are set up, Abby, is it's it quick from the standpoint of we give about 2 to 3 minutes per writing prompt. And so, and Whitney, obviously you can probably talk better to this than I can, but the idea is for people to hit a prompt quickly, think about the first thing that comes to mind, put that on, write that down, and then everybody shares what they want to share aloud, and then we move on to the next prompt. So rather than tackling this, what is on your mind, or what is the elephant in the room that you haven't talked about, we have certain prompts that are, I don't want to say easier, because that's not the right word to use, but smaller bites, I think the way you put it, of the overall narrative. Right, Whitney? I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, so the writing prompts that we use in the workshop are very focused and specific. So they're not, write about the day you were diagnosed. They're more specific to, what's one thing in the room that brings you joy, that kind of thing. So that when you quickly think about it, the goal is to get your mind in the process of kind of clearing the clutter and just start writing about it. And we all, I think, have said multiple times in the workshops, it doesn't matter what you write or how you write it. When we're doing the workshops, most of us are also doing the prompts at the same time. Mine are always lists or just 2 or 3 words. And then once people start sharing, a lot of times I think people are most people paraphrase. So the idea is that you just get in the practice of thinking about and zeroing in on something smaller instead of sitting down to write your whole story, because that, I think, is where a lot of people get stuck.
And even in the follow-up too, Abby, within the journals itself, is the lines are not straight lines like your typical journal. And the idea behind that was it's dotted lines. So if you want to draw instead of write, they can use that type of expression versus words, or both. So that's kind of another cool flexibility that we want to make sure is a part of this as well. Abby, repeat your second question because I have forgotten it. I apologize.
Well, you kind of just hit on it with your answer, but more expressing, yourself in some form other than writing, per se.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So essentially that, right? And even two, one of the prompts that I love that we use every now and then is sometimes look around your room and what's an object that brings you joy, or write something about an object that's in the room. And so even that, using the physical space in your own area to apply to your narrative too, is another way that we do that as well.
I also think a tip that I know that we've given in the workshops I've participated in is if you're feeling stuck, even regarding a certain prompt, to use your 5 senses. And that can be sometimes a way to be concrete about something. Like, can I write about the way something looks? Can I write about the way something smells or something felt? And that can be like a prompt within a prompt. So it doesn't feel like that blank piece of paper. It's like, maybe if I start with this thing about like maybe how something like physically felt, not emotionally felt, maybe, or what did I hear? That sometimes that can be a little bit of a tip too for that. I think that getting started and that initial hump is absolutely the hardest part. So we try to give as many tips and make the space feel comfortable. That, like, I think Whitney, you used the word, which is so true. It's a practice. It's nobody ever perfects journaling. I don't think that that's ever something we can ever achieve. So it's about learning how to practice something that we've never potentially ever done before. So like grace within that, and those easy tips to get started.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay. I know there was a question in the chat about how does one obtain a journal, and attending one of our writing workshops is the way to do that. And as Lisa said just now in the chat, we will be having another one, so please attend that, and we will ship those to you after attending the workshop itself. Okay, if there are no other questions, then we will wrap this up. First of all, I do want to thank Lizzy again from I'm Not Done Yet Foundation, the overall foundation, for making this all possible. Truly, Lizzy, thank you from the bottom of my heart. You helped make this go. So thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
that.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And then Kayla, Whitney, Rachel, and Lisa, thank you for doing this today. And thank you for everything else that you all do for us, whether full-time or it's just part of the workshops. It is greatly appreciated as well. A couple follow-up things real quick, not necessarily follow-up things, but a couple other items just as an FYI. If you have not seen, we launched our annual survey. We do this once a year to take a beat and see how we're doing and what we can improve on. So please help us fill that out. We're trying to wrap that up. Please just put the link in there. Try and wrap that up in the next week or two to make sure that we can start planning for 2023, which is hard to believe. And then the second is through August and September, we are running a fundraiser for our wellness programs. We do have wellness kits that we send for free to hospitals across the country. Right now, we have sent kits to Cleveland Clinic, University Hospital, MD Anderson in Houston, Children's Arkansas Hospital, University of Iowa AYA program. We just are going to give some this weekend to the University of Cincinnati's young adult program as well. And we've done some others and some other individuals in between, but just to kind of give you an idea from that standpoint. So along with our smoothie day that we run at University Hospitals here in Cleveland. Again, thank you all for attending. Thank you to our amazing team that presented today. Everyone have a wonderful day. Check out our programs and events page for everything else we have coming up. And for any survivors and patients out there that want to attend our happy hours, those are always every Thursday at 5:30 Eastern. And I had to say it before Liz yelled at me for not saying it. So there you go. Cool. All right, everybody, have a wonderful day. If our presenters could hang on for a second, I'd appreciate it. Everyone else, take care, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.